Hey everybody, welcome to this special celebratory Alabama's in the playoff edition of Pete Carroll was right, the confusingly named Alabama Football Live Video Show. We have on short notice Carter and Ben here to talk about Alabama's in. They're in. The committee done did it, y'all.
It was awesome. I don't have a lot of like well articulated thoughts right now other than that this is really pretty great.
Yeah. I actually have a cough drop in right now because I think I screamed so loud that I hurt something in my throat when it actually flashed up on the screen. It's been a roller coaster of emotions the last 24 hours, I would say.
Yeah, I was thinking, so before we get to yesterday and talk about the results of the games yesterday, I was thinking about this before, that this is such a unique thing in terms of a moment for a sports fan, right? There's very little that even compares to this. Maybe it's on Selection Sunday for college basketball.
Yeah.
But the stakes are so much lower, right? In that
right,
that
because the only people that don't know they're getting in, and that's something you can, as an Alabama fan, you can relate, because we knew that Alabama was getting in each of the last 3 years, so this was not really a dramatic day for us. Whereas in basketball, the people that don't know they're getting in are teams that are not going to win it all anyway.
Exactly. So the stakes are so much lower. But in this case, it's in this one instant, you go from either having a 25%, or in Alabama's case, probably more than 25% chance to win it all, or a 0% chance to win it all. It's a very much all or nothing thing. And the percentage it's such a big gap, right? What does Alabama have? What percentage chance does Alabama have to win it all right now? Gun to your head, without analyzing this too much. 35% maybe?
Yeah, 35, 40, I was going to say.
35, 40%. So let's lowball it and say it's 35%.
Yeah.
In that one instant, in that one tiny second where one graphic flashes up on the screen, you have a 35 percentage point swing.
Yeah.
There's really very little like that, and it's awesome. It's awesome.
It was just, man, I didn't think, and it was just I don't know, I was watching TCU Oklahoma in a bar yesterday, and things started to turn, and I was just like, okay, well, Orange Bowl, and then Georgia beat Auburn, which, I will never be sad about Auburn losing, but, that would have been a little bit helpful to Alabama, I guess, in terms, looking at it from a before we know what we know now perspective.
Right. Right. If Alabama's one loss had come against the number 2 ranked team, SEC champion, that does look a little better than what's Auburn ranked now?
7.
7.
I haven't actually showed it yet, I don't think, but apparently Kirby Hocutt let it slip that Auburn's 7.
So wait, is USC 6?
No, Wisconsin is.
Oh, right, Wisconsin. Okay, I was going to make a point about where Ohio State is ranked and where Auburn's ranked, but we'll do that later. So keep going. So Georgia. So we're watching SEC championship yesterday, and obviously that's a little bit disappointing. Not the biggest deal in the world, but a little bit disappointing. And then,
Clemson over Miami was good, I guess, because
just eliminated that chance of 2 loss Clemson. Yeah. Which is very legitimate. I really believe that there really would have been a very legitimate possibility that Clemson gets in if they had lost that game. Maybe not
the committee is basically treating it as though Clemson is undefeated. They have just given them a complete and total pass for. And I didn't even realize this. I knew Syracuse will ended up being 4-7 or something like that. They literally, the Clemson game was the last game they won.
Yeah.
They have not won since they beat Clemson, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. So obviously, that happens, and it's a small victory. It basically was the keep us alive type thing, I would have felt so, because even if Clemson wasn't going to make it ahead of Alabama, the fact that they would just then be back into that conversation, right? That it would be, oh, you've got Ohio State and Alabama. Oh, but you also have Clemson. It just muddies the water so much that I would lose more and more faith in it possibly being Alabama to make it. So that was a small victory, but also completely expected, right? First of all, Clemson's really good, as we'll talk a lot about in the next month. But also, Miami's
not that good.
Right.
I mean,
are they even a top 10 team? Is Miami even a top 10 team? Fringe, right?
I would say fringe top 10.
Fringe top 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
They struggled with bad teams all year.
yeah, yeah. So that happened. So obviously then the game that we're all watching is Ohio State and Wisconsin. So take me through like your emotions watching that game, and like let's talk about the game, what we saw and how we think it impacted Alabama at the time.
I honestly was not even watching it that closely just because I honestly didn't think it was going to make a difference. But then as it got later and later in the game, uh, like, and it was closer and it looked like Ohio State was going to win, but then it might be close. I was like,
Yeah.
and so when it finally that ended up being the final score, and it was exactly like, and we talked before the game, like what kind of game does this need to be, right? And it basically
Right.
needs to be like preferably low scoring, which 27-21, fine, and it needs to be as like close of a win as possible. And then like with Wisconsin like having a chance to win it at the end, which they did, and they didn't do it. So like if you were gonna wish for a certain outcome to that game, that's exactly what you would have wished for. And so I don't know. I guess you started to feel a little bit better coming out of that.
Yep. And
Um,
there was also a really like, even just to like sweeten the pot a little bit more, there was a really bad call in my opinion that went against Wisconsin on the final drive, when on that 1st and 10 from around midfield they called that holding penalty on Wisconsin, on like the left
mhm.
tackle for Wisconsin, which was a really good call. But the quarterback throws it down the left side, and there's a clear pass interference penalty down there too. Like the Ohio State guy basically tackles him, so
Yeah,
you get 1st and 20 instead of 1st and 10, and I mean that's a significant thing, right?
right.
So
Especially for an offense like Wisconsin.
exactly, right. Even more so for an offense that's like not very explosive like Wisconsin. So you even had like a little bit of an obvious bad call go against Wisconsin there. So it wasn't like I wouldn't say it was like a delegitimized victory for Ohio State, but
Right,
it's interesting to contrast that to maybe say what Ohio State did in 2014, right? Where they
right,
basically played their way into the committee on the night of, championship Saturday, and against the exact same opponent. Like,
right.
the committee, what was the final score of that? Like 56 to
59 to
nothing
nothing.
or so, 59 to
Yeah.
nothing. Cardell's throwing, 50-yard touchdown pass after 50-yard touchdown pass. This was just so different.
Yeah.
But despite all that, when you went to bed last night, what would you have put the odds on for Alabama to make it?
40% maybe.
Yeah.
That's like on the optimistic end.
And Mitch, I think said 50, which I think is like super optimistic. I think that's
Yeah.
like, I mean, look, I give Mitch credit. He's by the way, Mitch is not here because he's going to the Alabama basketball game, so roll tide to that as well.
Yeah.
I give him credit though, because he was more optimistic than us.
He consistently, yeah, he consistently had more faith that the committee would do the right thing, such as it is.
I think Mitch thought, I think probably we'd have to, we'll talk to him about this too, but his rationale was probably that he thought the eye test was going to carry more weight than we thought the eye test was going to carry.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think everybody agrees that or not everybody, but most people seem to agree that the eye test really favored Alabama. Kirk was saying on the broadcast that, after last night, he just couldn't with good conscience put Ohio State 4. I know Chris Brown, who obviously we all really like, tweeted out last night that he thinks that it shouldn't even be a discussion.
Yeah.
Gene Chizik had a tweet this morning about how he doesn't even think it's a discussion. Did you see that?
No, I did. Oh my! Well, and everyone knows there was no one whose word we put more weight in than eminent college football scholar and gentleman Gene.
Yeah,
Chizik.
let me hold on. Let's find. Let me just quickly.
I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
It's great. So the first part of this is very poorly written and kind of nonsensical. I don't really understand what he's saying, but he said, "Funny thing is, the 4 metrics are used in the college football playoff when 2 teams are comparable." Oh, I see what he's saying. So funny thing is, so he's just saying like they use these 4 metrics, but then he says, "Watch film. ... There's no comparison. Alabama should be a no-brainer over Ohio State, and every former coach on the committee should concur if they've watched the film." Sorry, folks. So, I think that was the one thing that Alabama had going for them. But with that being said, I was still like, I don't know, 25% maybe.
Yeah.
What did you think about? I was kind of surprised. I thought on like social media and stuff among like national guys, I thought there was more momentum for Alabama to make it than I anticipated.
Right,
I
same.
think if there was a few guys like I don't know, Pat Ford wrote like a long column about how he thought that like
Uh-huh.
it should be Alabama and it should like clearly should be Alabama. I really thought that everybody was going to be kind of united on the fact that it should be Ohio State, and I thought ultimately what was going to win out in most people's minds was the fact that Alabama doesn't have any elite wins. But
Yeah.
that wasn't really the case, and like that gave me a little bit of hope because I was like, well, if the consensus is that this is more of like a 50-50 toss-up thing and there's some momentum for Alabama, then
Right.
maybe Alabama really does have a chance because I'm thinking that the same things that are swaying those people are probably also going to be swaying
Oh,
the
it was
committee, right?
like me. Yeah.
It only stands to reason. But then the late money pouring in on
Yeah,
Ohio State
that
to
was
make
well,
it.
and so I had two serious swings this morning because when Heather Dinich tweeted that she thinks it would be what it was.
Yeah,
I mean, she's the people have various opinions about Heather,
yeah,
but like, um, I mean, her whole shtick is that she's like the insider with the committee. If like anyone has a pulse on what they're thinking, it's her.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
like, I was pretty pumped when I saw that. But then I don't know if the rest of y'all have seen this, but Ben sent me and Mitch a link to a tweet this morning that apparently, like 10 minutes before the rankings came out, money was just pouring in on Ohio State. Like the lines, it was like Alabama had been,
Like minus 275, minus 290 or something, and they fell all the way to minus 175, which is
yeah,
like a dramatic, super dramatic swing in the last second.
yeah. And so this guy who was tweeting this was speculating that like it had leaked that Ohio State was in, and so money was pouring in at the last second. And I was like, no, 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 no.
And this is like such a great I think this is such a great example of how like rational people can get swayed by like even like in the most emotional moments, the most rational people can get swayed by super irrational thoughts. Like I
Yeah,
tend to think that we're like pretty rational people, and
yeah.
we see something like that, and it's like, oh my God, there's a conspiracy, it's leaking out. All the people are making lots of money. And like, that wouldn't if Alabama wasn't, I feel like if Alabama wasn't in the discussion here, if it was between two other teams, Ohio State and somebody else, and we had no vested interest in it, we
Yeah.
would have seen something like that and been like, oh, well, that's crap. The rankings aren't going to leak out. They're certainly not going to leak out some random fucking gamblers so they can make a little bit of money. We would have been like, okay, that's all nonsense. But because it's Alabama, like we were overwhelmed by these irrational concerns that, oh, well, there's a lot of money, so somebody knows, and oh my God, they're not going to make it. But with all that being said, it still didn't look good up until the
No,
moment where it was announced.
no.
Even ignoring the Vegas thing, like I didn't. I really truly was shocked.
Well, and, like it was really the thing that got me was, and we talked about this plenty, but it was like the fact that like their whole thing is that they're like, when two teams are close, we look at these things like
Right.
conference championships and head to head and
Right.
stuff like that. And so when Kirby Hocutt said last week it's close between 5 and 8,
Yeah.
and then you say that okay, it's close between those two teams now, and then one of them is going to get no matter what it looks like a win over a current top 4 team, and they're going to grab a conference
Right.
championship, then the big win erases whatever margin is there, and then the conference championship is like the tiebreaker. And so
And that
I was convinced that that was what they were going to go with.
I mean, when we went on like when we talked on Thursday on our show on Thursday, we were like really like all about TCU, right? Like we ended
Yeah,
the
we
podcast
basically
talking just about TCU. We made it as if it was kind of an all or nothing thing because we took the committee's word. We looked at these things, and it was interesting. So it was interesting. So last night, Tom Fornelli tweeted out, "Just going to leave this here for those of you who can't figure out why the committee might take Ohio State ahead of Alabama." And what he linked to was the thing on the playoff committee's website about when circumstances at the margins indicate that teams are comparable, then the following criteria must be considered. And one of those criteria, like Carter just said, is championships won. And that's why we didn't think that Alabama had a chance. But Barton Simmons quotes, who's Barton Simmons again? He writes for CBS Sports.
Rivals.
Yeah,
Something.
I think he maybe did write. No, he was 247.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and he tweeted, except how do you pronounce the guy's name? Hocutt? I should really know this. Hokut. Okay. He said, he quote tweeted that and he said, except Hokut has said that they haven't been directed on how much they should weight each criterion. So basically they can do whatever they want. And like that, I think is really what saved Alabama. The fact that this committee has no, they're not really tied to anything, right? Like ultimately at the end of the day, they can just throw caution to the wind and just do their thing. Like if they think that Alabama's the best team, they can just throw Alabama in, no matter what their criteria says. but again though, like I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I saw Alabama's name come up on that screen. Was let me ask you this: was Heather
Drake Kirkpatrick, Swag City out here tweeting "Roll Tide, roll, baby"?
Let's go. I've been meaning to go through like all the players' tweets or something.
Yeah.
Like, I think Mac Wilson tweeted something like, "We really."
Mac's been tweeting like crazy. Mac has been standing so hard, man.
But didn't he? I saw he said something like, "We really appreciate getting the bye this week" or something to get healthy or to rest up.
Oh no! Okay. Ryan Anderson tweeted a couple emoji. Then close call. I thought my dogs were going to the Delaware Rotisserie Chicken Bowl. Hashtag let the tide roll. First of all, Delaware Rotisserie Chicken Bowl is a great
That's
name.
pretty great. Yeah.
Great fake bowl name. And then Garrick Dieter replies, "Those are the bowls I went to with Bowling Green." And Ryan replies, "Yeah, I saw that you had the most receiving yards in the Big Lots Bowl back in the day."
That's probably true. Big Lots. That really sounds like it could be a name of a bowl, like the Big Lots. I don't know.
Yeah, the Big Lots Detroit Bowl or something.
Yeah, something like that. So like, I don't know. How did you react? I mean, obviously, like happy, but like.
Yeah, I screamed so loud. I think I scarred the cat. Maybe like damaged my throat. Shit.
It was stunning. It was really stunning. Was Heather the only person? Like, a lot of people said that they think Alabama should be in, right? Like Pat Ford wrote his column saying he thinks Alabama should be in.
Yeah.
Pollock, Herbstreit, Booger, they all said on the show before the announcement. Right, even Kirk, said that they think Alabama should be in. But they all predicted that it would be Ohio State. And like, did anybody besides Heather even predict Alabama? I didn't see anybody.
Here we go. Hokut apparently specifically said. I keep looking at the TV because I'm trying to see if they brought Saban on yet.
Yeah.
I think I've seen them interview the other coaches, but Brian Fisher tweeted Hokut on Alabama Ohio State. More damaging was the 31-point loss to unranked Iowa. Thank you, committee, for not putting the loss by 31 to an unranked 7-win Iowa team.
Yeah, you know, I don't really want to make this about like. I don't know. I people are upset, and like I kind of get it. I understand why people are upset, and I was tweeting a lot last night about how there's no objectively right way to compare these teams, and it is true that like Ohio State does have better, more impressive wins than Alabama. So like if that's your end all be all, then okay, like that's cool, I guess. I don't agree necessarily, but like I can't objectively say that you're wrong about that. And I understand that a lot of people are going to be upset about this, and you know, they're going to say that Alabama didn't prove themselves against great teams and didn't, you know, should have won their way in, and that's fine. You know, it doesn't really bother me because first of all, we've been through this before.
Yep.
Right? 6 years ago, I mean, we were in this exact same situation. And also, I just don't give a shit.
God, can you imagine being an Auburn fan right now?
Well, that's so great.
Auburn, and you beat Alabama and Georgia, and they're both in the playoff, and you are not.
I was thinking about that. So I was thinking about that, and we've talked about this before, and we texted about it, and I would probably mention it on the show. You know, I didn't grow up in Alabama, so I don't have the same feelings about Auburn as most Alabama fans do, because I just, you know, it's different when you're not like when you root for Alabama because you're an out-of-state person and you have family, family that roots for Alabama that lives in Alabama, like so family ties, or you went to Alabama but you were from out of state originally, it's not the same, right, as growing up in it. So I don't hate Auburn, but the fact that Auburn beat Alabama last week and it was like the great day for Auburn and the terrible day for Alabama, and then you fast forward 8 days later and Alabama's in the playoff and Auburn's out in the playoff, that's funny as hell. That is
it's amazing. It's amazing. And someone just tweeted this. I think it might have been our friend Greg Dawkins. Somebody with one of the Vote Doug Jones and Roll Tide Twitter avatars. There's like 8 of them now, so I can't keep them straight. Said like it basically turned out best for everyone in the state because Auburn won the Iron Bowl, which is all they care about, and Alabama gets a chance to play for the national title, which is what we
all they care about.
So
everybody got what they wanted. It was great. Just like, now let me ask you this about Auburn. Where do you think that Auburn should be ranked? Thinking about this last night, or I was thinking about this last night and this morning, and I was like, I don't really, even ignoring Alabama's role in all of this, I don't think that Ohio State should be ranked ahead of Auburn.
No, I would put them at 5 or 6. They should definitely be ahead of Wisconsin.
Yeah, look, Ohio, like, what are Auburn's losses? So first of all, Auburn beat half the teams in the playoff field.
Yeah,
half of their losses are to teams in the playoff field, and their other losses by, I think, 1 point to LSU. And so at that point, like, that's a really, really, really good resume. They don't belong in the playoff, but they should be 5, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Would you take them or Ohio State? Who would you put, them or Ohio State higher? I think we both agree that Alabama should be 4, but then like, what would you do 5 and 6?
I mean, I'd probably go Auburn, right? Because, like, I mean, yeah, they have 3 losses, but it's like.
I mean, Auburn was 2, right? Auburn was.
Like, if you're gonna make this about wins, then.
Exactly.
Nobody can beat a win over Alabama and a win over Georgia.
And they have they played so many good teams, right? 4 of Auburn's 13 games were against teams ranked in the top 4.
Yep.
3 of Auburn's games were against teams ranked in the top 3. So let me throw a bone to Auburn. Y'all don't belong in the playoff, but you should be 5.
If you want to be in the playoff, you could have not lost by 21 yesterday to a team you had already beat by 24 points.
That's true.
Or, you could be in consideration if you hadn't blown a 20-point lead at LSU.
Let me ask you this, by the way. I mean, this isn't really related directly to Alabama, but it might be relevant down the road. What did you think of the SEC championship yesterday? Because I went into that really feeling good about Auburn, so much so that I may have lost some money because of that. It's probably sacrilege on this podcast to admit that I bet on Auburn as an Alabama fan, but at Auburn Auburn down 3 at halftime, down 10-7, was plus 175 to win the game. That I was thinking, like, that should be like a pick 'em at that point. If you're going to give them those sort of odds, a 3-point margin, and I really think that Auburn's a better team. Like, what did you think of that? Like, was it really? Does Auburn really have an issue with perimeter runs? Like, I feel like that's part of it on that side of the ball. I think that's a big
part of it, and also it's so hard to be. Like, hold on, can you take your headphones out? I'm getting like.
Oh, sure.
Echo. Which is weird because you'd think that would happen more like without headphones because it would like pick up the sound, but
Does that sound better?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
It's the sort of thing I hesitate to talk about because it's not really it's the sort of thing people throw out and it's not really an analytical thing. But I've never seen a team like this year's Auburn who is such a different team home and away.
Yeah.
Or home and neutral site. Like they like. I don't know. I guess
I'm not surprised. I'm not I can't say I'm surprised that the Georgia defense played well, right? Because
No.
we know that the Georgia defense is really well. And despite Auburn's performances at home the last few weeks, we also know that the Auburn offense is not the greatest, is not, is not the greatest group, and they could be prone to having kind of like a stinker performance.
Yeah.
But Georgia made so many plays on offense.
Like, yeah, I was surprised by that.
Fromm's final line was like,
oh yeah, he was awesome.
Yeah, he was like really good. And
which like I just blanked out. I was as critical of as anybody of him after the first loss, because I mean he looked like a total freshman out there. Like he wasn't, they weren't really having him throw anything other than screens and slants and sideline fades. But give the kid credit, he was awesome.
Yeah. And also part of it was just like they just made plays, right? Like Georgia we talked about all those 50-50 plays that Alabama didn't make. Georgia just made those plays. Like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel were just breaking tackles, right? Making one guy miss in the open field, turning 5-yard gains into 25-yard gains. They did that so many times.
Yeah.
The strip on Kerryon Johnson that they made, the blocked field goal that they had, they just made the strip on Stidham when it was at least probably going to be 10-0, if not 14-0, and that's really where the game turned. So like they just made those plays, right? They picked up a blitz here and there and allowed Fromm to make a play on 3rd and long. I think that's like the very important point that we tried to touch on repeatedly after the Iron Bowl, which is that the margin in these games sometimes is so razor thin when the teams are so close that just a handful of plays that who makes them and who doesn't make them is largely fluky. Sometimes they go in one direction and that team wins, and that team wins comfortably. But Georgia's not 3 touchdowns better than Auburn. No. They just made more plays.
They weren't 24 points worse than them the first time.
Exactly. It's probably a pretty even matchup. I still, if they played again on a neutral field, I still might take Auburn, maybe. But it would be close. I could take Georgia too. I'd have to think about it more. But like there's not a huge disparity between the two. Let's just quickly, because we probably don't want to make this podcast too long, but let's just look forward for a second. And talk about the playoff. Playoffs January 1st this year, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. So how much do you buy into the idea that everything that has happened in the last 8 days is the best thing that could happen to Alabama in terms of losing?
Literally, I was just thinking about this. I was like, man, Georgia was perfectly capable of beating Auburn. I wish they had just, my first thought was, I wish they had just done it the first time, and then Alabama could have gone to the SEC championship game and wouldn't have to think about this. And then I realized, no, this is actually the perfect possible outcome, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if Alabama, and let's say everything else goes the same way, if Georgia beats Auburn, and so at that point, Alabama has won the SEC West. It doesn't matter what happens in the Iron Bowl. Well, if the Iron Bowl goes the same and Alabama loses, then Alabama goes into the SEC championship needing to win.
Right. So certainly from a playoff odds standpoint, it was the best thing that can happen. Yeah. But what about looking forward to the playoff? Like how much do you buy? Like the players are saying this, right? Like Mac had some tweet about how like if you just let us in, we're gonna roll or something. And I think that Marty Smith, when he was reporting from Tuscaloosa before the rankings were announced, he said something that the one constant theme from the Alabama players is that if we get a chance, we're going to take advantage of this. I feel like the loss, like losing that game to Auburn in terms of their prospects of winning future games, could be the best thing that happens to them.
Yeah, no, it's certainly easy to, and this is the sort of thing that you really. People say these sorts of things without putting enough qualifiers on them in terms of like, we're making speculations about mindset and preparation here that don't have a whole lot of basis in fact, right?
Right.
But I think it's very easy to see that to construct a narrative in your head, and a very reasonable one, I think, that the way this turned out, Alabama gets a loss to make, people talk shit about them. They get angry. They get focused. They don't have to play a game next week and get more time to get healthy.
Right. Right.
So it's very easy to see all these factors coming together, and you end up getting this mostly healthy, very angry, very focused Alabama team that you might not get if they were 13-0
And
or 12-1.
would you say that, like, under Saban, Alabama has played best late in the year in years where they lost? Like, if you look at look at
2015.
2015, 2011, right? 2011, after the LSU loss, they finished super strong. But if you look at 2013, where they didn't lose until late, they played they did not play their best game against Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and then they played kind of pretty crummy in the bowl game against Oklahoma. And I feel like, I don't know, 2008 maybe, right? They come out in the bowl game and they play crummy after losing.
Yeah.
Or what are some other years? Last year, how about last year? Like, they look listless against. They didn't do anything offensively in the SEC championship. They didn't do anything offensively.
Which is hilarious to say about a game where they scored like 55 points, but
but it was just like some late runs after Florida was terrible, and like a whole bunch of defensive scores, block punts for scores, like crazy things like that. I really do think that, I think it's important to remember, right, that these are just college kids. And these are college kids who are really, really, really good at football, and who might get sometimes a little complacent when they haven't lost. And they
might have a little of the rat poison.
They might, right?
Which is now even this like more Lane's thing than Saban's thing, which is hilarious.
Yeah, Lane's really co-opted it, but I don't know. I feel really good going into the playoff now. Clemson is going to be super, super difficult, of course.
Yeah.
And honestly, if they were to win that game, whoever they would face in the national championship is going to be
Georgia or Oklahoma.
a tough matchup. The interesting thing about this playoff, my very first impression of it, is that I think that any team can win it all. And I don't know, have you felt that way about any other playoff?
Nope.
So last year, definitely Washington was not going to win it all. And honestly, Ohio State, with their offensive struggles, probably wasn't going to win it all either way. In 2015, Michigan State wasn't going to win it all. In 2014, maybe 2014 was the other year where you kind of thought that everybody had a shot. Most people probably would not have agreed that Florida State had a shot. I thought that they had a small shot to win it all. But this year, it's definitely there's the least amount of separation between the teams in the playoff. Yeah,
I agree.
And I guess the one other thing that I
could finally get compelling semifinal matchups for the first time since, man, we have to play in the Sugar Bowl again.
How many good? Well, there's so small downside. but really though, right? So there's been 6 semifinal games. How many of them have been good? Just one, right? Alabama, Ohio State was the only one that was like a good competitive game, which is, interesting. The other thing the last thing I was going to say, how confident are you, ignoring what's deserved and what's not deserved, and who has the best resume and who doesn't have the best resume, ignoring all of that stuff, how confident are you that the 4 best teams are in the playoff?
Pretty confident. Like, this is, it's not a year like, say, 2015, where Ohio State was definitely one of the best 4 teams that year.
Even if they didn't deserve it, even if I wouldn't pick them to get in.
Right, I wouldn't have put them in.
Right. Or last year, where teams were definitely better than Washington. Who would be the biggest contender to be in the top 4 best teams that isn't in the top 4 best teams? Is it Auburn? Or is it Ohio State?
I mean, I guess we sort of answered that question when we both said we would put Auburn over Ohio State. But I mean, like, Ohio State's still number 1 in S&P Plus, right? Like, they look bad against Oklahoma. They look awful against Iowa. In most of their other games, they looked absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think if Ohio State had been in, they would have had a very good chance to win it all. But Alabama deserved to be in. So.
That's right. Ohio State also, they played so many teams that were just listless.
Yeah.
Weren't they? Like, there's a lot made of the upper part of the Big Ten, and about how it is really good. Like, there's a lot of very good teams in the upper part of the Big Ten. But the middle and bottom of the Big Ten is just kind of bad, right? I mean, there's just like a handful of teams that are just completely non-competitive and couldn't even put up a fight like if they had to. And maybe there's something to be said for the fact that Ohio State's advanced statistics are in part a function because they get fat against those teams. Like Ohio State is so well equipped to just destroy Maryland. Right? If Maryland kept a game against Ohio State within 40 points, I would be shocked. Yeah. Because they just don't have the ability to do that. The talent level on those teams is just so bad. And Alabama faces some not so great teams too, but they don't get the same kind of talent gap that Ohio State enjoys, right? Because Ohio State recruits like an SEC team and then faces these Big Ten teams that are they just don't get any players. And Alabama faces some not so great teams, whether this year it's like a Tennessee or an Arkansas or whatever. But at least those teams have players.
Right.
There's not this unbelievable talent gap that there is between Ohio State and the bottom teams in the Big Ten. So I do think that part of it is because they just play so many games that they're just so much better than the other team. But I don't want to take anything away from Ohio State. They had a good year.
Yeah.
They had a really good year. But they also lost by 31 to Iowa.
Yeah, just that's all you had to do. Like nothing. We've seen the committee would forgive, a loss to a team like Syracuse, and they lost to Oklahoma, like whatever, like it was at home, but but just you can't lose to a team as bad as Iowa by 31 points.
Yeah,
you can get upset by a bad team. Plenty of playoff teams have.
Right.
Don't get blown out by a bad team.
Yeah, and it's just the whole idea of like, oh well, it's Iowa at Kinnick, like things happen. Well, things happen, like Purdue winning at Kinnick 2 weeks later.
Yeah,
right. That kind of defeats the purpose. Or kind of like it's very defeating for that argument. Iowa is not some great team at home because they've proven this year that they're not some great team at home when they only beat Minnesota by 7 points at home and when they lose by 9 points to Purdue at home. So you can't say like, oh, well, they're just like super tough at home, even if they're not so great overall, because their actual results don't bear that out.
Right.
But anyway, do you have any other thoughts? Anything else to say about the selection?
I would say my final thought is, Clemson's a tough team, and this is a tough semifinal matchup. I don't know if Alabama's going to win that game, but they're not going to get shut out 31-0.
It is also. I was thinking about this too before the matchups were revealed. It is very cool that they're getting this 3 times in a row.
Oh, I know.
Alabama Clemson gets like a rubber match to kind of decide this.
Yeah, even if it's not the national championship, like it's still pretty awesome.
I think these two teams have been, without question, the 2 best teams in the country over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And they deserve to kind of be meeting each year. And I think it's got a little like Cavs Warriors thing going on where, I mean, now they're not meeting in the championship this year, but that's okay. That's okay. We can play in the semifinal also. Yeah. So I'm very, very, very excited for that. Clemson is good, but it will be very nice to face a Clemson team where number 4 is not Deshaun Watson.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
How nice is it going to be to take the field and the guy dropping back to throw, taking the snap and dropping back to throw? The Clemson is not wearing number 4. I don't know what number. Kelly Bryant's not number 4, is he? Okay.
No.
that whole thing was going to have gone very poorly if Kelly Bryant was also number 4. But seriously though, I mean, that's just like they're dramatically weakened just by that fact.
Yeah, but they're still great. Like all the other things that made that team great last year, they mostly still have. But in particular, that defensive line. But they don't have number 4, and number 4 kind of.
Number 4 was pretty good.
He was okay.
He was pretty good.
He's fine.
I am just so excited that we can spend this next month, no matter what happens against Clemson.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited that we can spend this next month talking about that matchup, talking about Alabama playing a playoff game, talking about like I'm excited to watch Clemson. Go back on YouTube and watch some Clemson games and think about that game and text you guys about that game and talk on the podcast about that game and tweet about that game, as opposed to doing those things for the Orange Bowl against Miami or whoever it would have been. Like, then it's so night and day, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that like we have this matchup to look forward to as opposed to that matchup to look forward to is pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
It very much changes my outlook over the next month or so.
Seriously. It's so different. But yeah, so that's I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a lot of really well articulated thoughts on this, like I said at the jump.
Yeah, no.
But I'm just thrilled that this is how it happened. That was as exciting a sports moment. That really was very high up there in terms of like exciting sports moments.
Especially in terms of like
uniqueness.
not on the field moments.
Yeah, well, it's probably definitely the most exciting moment I've ever had as a sports fan for something that's not on the field.
That didn't involve an actual game, yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, what are the comparisons? Like a player signing with your favorite team for pro teams, or a commit selecting your team. I mean,
yeah, I don't even think there's a. I mean, I guess the most directly comparable one is finding out in 2011 that Alabama was going to play LSU.
But that was so different, though, right? Because we were very confident going in that was going to be, and then the news was trickling out throughout the day that it was making it look like more and more like Alabama. Like you had the AP poll trickle in, and the Harris Interactive poll trickle in, and some of the computers were slowly trickling in. I remember like Brad Edwards, right? He was like ESPN's resident BCS expert, saying well before anything was unveiled that Alabama was basically like a lock. So that was so different than just like this one moment where nobody knows anything and bam, now you know everything. You go from knowing absolutely nothing to knowing absolutely everything in a nanosecond. It just doesn't compare to that, right? So it's so different. And I just didn't expect it. Like that's what makes it so good. I'm so glad it enriches the moment so much that we had no expectations.
The combination of elation and surprise
is really unique,
really,
and like
really
not something that I've really experienced much. So this was great. I'm going to continue to celebrate this. This has been an awesome day. I am very excited to start talking about an Alabama-Clemson matchup, but we maybe will wait at least a few hours. We'll maybe wait at least a few hours. I might sneak in a few tweets about early thoughts on that game tonight, but you know, for at least for the next like 30 minutes or something, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that Alabama's
our equivalent of the 24-hour rule. You know,
exactly.
Get to celebrate this.
Exactly. All right.
All right. Well, it's going to be very good to end the show on Roll Tide and not some other team. Other team cheer.
Well, let's So wait. So we have to though. We do have to give some shout outs though to. Well, we have to give a shout out to Ohio State.
Yeah.
First of all,
thanks a lot.
Beating Wisconsin. Thank you. What did they do? What's the O? What is it like?
I don't even know.
Or do they do it like this or whatever? Like, okay, like thank you, Ohio State, for taking care of business in that game. But also thank you,
not too well.
Right. Thank you, Ohio State, for not doing it in too impressive fashion. And thank you, Wisconsin, because that, you know, it was 21-7, like Ohio State seemed like they had a chance to pull away there. So thank you, Wisconsin, for staying in the game and making it competitive and making some plays here and actually
staying in the game but not winning.
Right. So thank you to those teams. Not a lot of thanks to TCU. Y'all didn't play so great. Not a lot of thanks to Auburn. You guys didn't really do so great either. Thank you, Clemson, for just dominating and taking that out of the table. Fresno State didn't really matter, but y'all could have won. That would have been nice.
Yeah, that would have been helpful. But
that would have been nice. Well. But basically, we just have it. We owe it all to Ohio State and Wisconsin for putting together this great joint team effort. Like y'all,
excellent performance.
Thank you. Like y'all collaborated so well to make this the perfect result. Because the last thing I'll say is that if Ohio State went out there and won that game by 30 points, they would be in the playoff. I have absolutely zero doubt.
Well,
I have to listen to.
I'll
have to go back and watch. I recorded the show after the selection, but and maybe they asked Hocut about that. I don't know, but I'm so sure that if Ohio State looked really good and won by a very impressive margin, that it would be them at 4 and not Alabama. So like those two teams did Alabama such a service. They go up on the mantle with the Iowa States of the world and the Baylors of the world and the Stanfords of the world and the teams that gave Alabama great victories in the past to make up for losses that they had. So you all go up on the mantle. You're not quite where Iowa State is. Iowa State, I think, kind of has their own place.
that's a whole different tier. But
that's a whole different tier. And Baylor and Stanford, maybe you can go with those guys, from for the 2012 victory. So I really appreciate that. We were forever grateful, and that's kind of it. That's really all I have to
say. All right. Well, we will be back with y'all sometime in the next couple weeks to preview the Clemson game.
Can't wait.
So it's gonna be fun. And roll Tide.
And roll Tide.